My name is Dale Allen Hoffman. I'm doing this video to intro my involvement in my workshop at the Spring Conference of the Southern Dowsers, the Appalachian chapter of American Society of Dowsers. This is in March 2015, the 19th through the 22nd. The talk that I'm going to be giving is called "In the Beginning Was the Frequency." This, obviously, a lot of people would know that from the beginning of the Gospel of John, the Aramaic book of Yohanan. Gospel of John, we know of "In the beginning was the Word." And little background of what I do: I work with ancient texts. I'm not a pure translator in the sense that I sit there with these texts and translate some kind of theology or some sort of top level, what would be called peshat, or literal everyday level common language translation. What I actually do is I seek to bring in the Gnosticism that was removed, especially from early Christianity, the ancient myth, the Sumerian, Akkadian, Phoenician, Egyptian, a lot of the grander stories, the astrology, what we know from archaeology, anthropology, cutting-edge science, quantum science, philosophy, psychology, the whole nine yards, and to be able to unlock the greatest nuance of what a lot of these texts actually meant. And a lot of times when I do radio shows, one of the things I'm often asked is, what's the hardest word to get from Aramaic into English? And instantaneously my response is always, actually, it's the word that's translated as word. If you've studied Koine Greek, the word would be logos, which again doesn't mean simply word. That would be lexis or lego in Greek. That would be a word on a page. In Aramaic, that word is milta. And that word milta is one of the most rich, finely nuanced words that I've ever come across in my life from any language. My book that's coming out in May of this year, it's called Echoes of an Ancient Dream. I have a little section where I give examples of English words that could be used to translate that word milta from Aramaic into English. And I started out with about 7 pages, which with about 2 or 3 words or phrases per line. That went on for quite a few pages. I ended up cutting it down to just, I don't know how many lines, maybe 15 lines or so. The issue was that each of those words or phrases were facets or nuances of what milta means, but none of them encapsulate it totally. Frequency is another example. Word, instance, manifestation, emanation, vision, you could say Torah, law with a capital L, not man-made ordinance, which shouldn't even be called law. Interesting that in dowsing, when we're speaking of these eternal forces, not only the manifest physical forces, but these eternal forces that are more sensed than even experienced, each of those forces falls into the line of something in Aramaic that's called rookha, ruach in Hebrew, ruch in Arabic. Ruach and rookha is a word that, feminine gendered term, meaning that it's something that's more sensed than seen per se. Examples of rookha would be spirit, breath, energy, magnetism, solar flares, cosmic expansion, electromagnetism. Today, nuclear forces could fall into rookha. Now, that word rookha in the first century, the way it was essentially understood was that it was a non-manifest, or that its source was non-manifest, and we could feel its manifest effects with our senses. Something that was more sensed than particularly seen. Wind is another example of rookha. Now, dowsing fits exactly into this because we're talking about working with eternal forces that not necessarily all kinds of reading equipment is going to be able to pick up. It's about the subtle nuance. It's almost something that's more breathed in from another realm rather than just some kind of particular physical thing that science can very easily pick up on. Funny thing about science is I often ask the question, will science ever find God? And people say, sure, they have. Superstring theory, boson, the Higgs boson, the God particle, whatever, Big Bang. Remember, number one, these are all theories, but number two, the issue is that their own quantum law that says as they observe, they create. So what they're seeing isn't it's not the God that they seek, because in the words of St. Francis of Assisi, what you are looking for is what is looking. And their own quantum law, or I should say theory now, states that the act of observation creates. And that's the funny thing, is this is also incredibly entangled there is no separation from the inside and the outside, the light and the dark, the positive and the negative. And there's a lot of these new agey spiritual philosophies of the last couple decades that are like happy, 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 lots of teeth, and it becomes so overly masculine and forced out that you literally breed egomaniacs out of that. Whereas people that are more withdrawn, more of the feminine to the point, because the feminine receives, the masculine projects. And the feminine draws in, and too much feminine, not only do we get sort of the head in the clouds effect, but we get, of course that's where depression comes from, is too much of the drawing in. Essentially, the gist of what I speak of is being in the milta, being able to be in that open flow of the word, what was called Christos or Christos in the ancient Greek, which means a channel of divinity, channel of God. And when we are be able to be in the balance between the inside and the outside, the light and the dark, the positive and the negative, that's when we come into that conscious realization, not only of a force that we can use to find water or even something that's sensed with the senses, so much as something that's directly experienced, not as an external entity and or force or rookha, so much as you realize that what you're looking for is what is looking. Now that's the essence of what I'm going to be sharing here at the Dowsing Conference. I'm so incredibly excited about it because it's going to enable me to really strip this down completely, down to the absolute bare essence of what really is it that's happening here, not necessarily in terms of manifestation, but how do we open the heart, perceptions, etc., the intelligence, enough to be able to strip back to the intellect and the belief systems, the ideologies, the frames, the religions, and all of the BS, garbage belief systems that pile on top, and to be able to realize that the more open we are in the process, the more we realize that what we are seeking in terms of sensing these forces, what we're actually seeking is what we are. And the more open that we can be to that authentic self, the authentic light, the more open we realize that we are the process itself. It's not something that we open ourselves up to something external, but rather that in the beginning is the emanation, the consciousness, the awareness, that light. Interesting. So what we're going to do is we're going to get really deep. Of course, my main frame of reference is through the teachings of what we know of as Yeshua, Jesus, here in the West, which is an incredible amalgamation of Egyptian myth, of so many different archetypes, myths, story, astrotheology. There's so much mixed in there that you're not going to get through any kind of Christian seminary or theological school. It just won't happen. You're only going to get what's fed to you, and then you adopt those belief systems, and they actually boil down and harden to become a block and a barrier to the very sensitivity that you sought in the first place. This isn't about a relationship with a concept or some kind of outside force, but rather the realization that whatever that force is, whatever God is, I am. And I'm really going to get into down into the root of the root and the bud of the bud, in the words of E.E. Cummings, to be able to unpack this from the deepest level that I'm able to. And the amazing thing is that when I allow myself to be open, and I've got a crowd of people that are beautifully open, the palpable essence, presence, energy in the room is something that not only does it bring me to tears and put a lump in my throat very often, but it really gives me that realization that we're heading on the right path. So being a part of the conference is something that I'm really excited about. I'd love to see you there, and please do come up, introduce yourself to me. I look forward to meeting you. Blessings. Baruch.